Sure. So Jim is looking out over the.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
She should stand.
Gracious.
She can. Yes, this will be. Oh, there were 600 people.
Yeah.
They were bad.
No, I figured.
I'm trying.
We've got it. Fun round.
It's amazing. Yeah. So, yeah. I have to know what's. Other than those two. But I was. They won't. That's what I have now. For a second, I thought she was JV.
She's not.
I was like, oh, now there's, oh, see there it was.
I'm very glad that I got it. Because that, the poor flag.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Sarah. Get it nice.
No, you're fine with your sheets, so no worries.
She's in the team. I have other children.
No. Regularly said. Yeah, we try. Try. In fact, it's so probably you a lot better than us.
She's a.
It's all looks pretty good.
Yes. So you're already set? Are we okay? Okay. All right, it's the witching hour and all the technology is working, so we have everybody available. Wants to be available by Zoom. So I will call the meeting to order. Mr. Whitlash is in Florida. He said he's working from some home on the Gulf Coast. I don't know why he elected to be there rather than here. So he's with us. Chase Harris, who is an attorney with Mr. Whitlash's firm, is going to play the role of Mr. Whitlash when it comes to roll call votes. You may recall he also keeps the minutes, so let's be respectful. He's now doing double duty. And make sure we seek recognition and I'm able to help him as he's keeping record of what we're doing today. So with that, if you would, Chase, if you would go ahead and take the roll.
John Wyckoff,
Present.
Doug Bruce,
Present.
Eric Spoonmore. Here. Joyce Pauling,
Here.
Jay Bear.
Here on Zoom.
Adam Tees. Here. Jim Silvers. Here.
So we certainly have a quorum and all are in attendance. I'd like to recognize we have some people with us today who I want to formally recognize and express appreciation for their attendance. R.G. Rice, who's Corporation Counsel from the City of Bloomington, is with us. Larry, there's Larry Allen, who's also one of the city attorneys. Julie Thomas, County Commissioner, Isabel Piedmont Smith, who's President of the Bloomington City Council. And I want to especially recognize Cindy Canarney, who's with us today. Cindy's in the back of the room, and Cindy is President of the Monroe County Convention Center Building Corporation, who, if I understand everything that I'm reading, is still the owner of this facility until such time as bonds are retired and then holding is transferred to the county. And then we have other aspects of our relationship that happen after that. So, Cindy, thank you, and thank you for your service. And I don't think we've all recognized the building corporation and its role in all of this. It's not formally part of the interlocal agreement, but thank you for being here. And I know you were in attendance at our proposal meeting last week, where we provided Red Coats and Mary JSL provided information to those who were interested in the construction management RFP that we had out. So thank you for being so involved in what we're doing. Appreciate it. All right, approval of consent agenda is the next item. Circulated to you the minutes of the April meeting, as well as the claims register for this month. Hope you've had an opportunity to look those over, and would ask now if there's a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second by Joyce Poling? Is there any discussion of the consent agenda? So all those in favor will respond to Mr. Harris. Roll call, please.
John Wyckoff,
Yes.
Doug Bruce,
Yes.
Eric Spoonmore,
Yes.
Joyce Bowling,
Yes.
Jay Bear,
Yes.
Adam Tees,
Yes.
Jim Silverstein.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is a treasurer's report. If we have a treasurer's report.
I have very minimal report, aside from the claims that we just approved. Not received any new claims, but I understand we may have another one that's been submitted, or is that?
That's correct.
Okay. So, yeah, other than that, I have no additional report for you. Mr. Underwood, is there any?
We'll be sending out to you later, myself, the 22-23 food beverage report that was recently. I am happy to report we have a bank account, we do have checks.
Official.
We're official, assuming we get money on Friday from the city, invoice.
Any questions about the treasurer's report? If not, the next item on the agenda is the update on the hotel few responses. And Mr. Whitlash, since those responses came to you, can you provide us information, please?
Yes, can you hear me okay? You can hear me? Okay. Yes, we received in a timely fashion, we received 6 responses. We have shared those with JS Held, who is going to be analyzing those in more detail and will be reporting back to us. Deb, any other report that you want to provide to us at this point?
I would just say we have received them. We have started to digest what there are many names that you will recognize, that you would recognize in terms of hotel. We do know that while the original RFQ had contemplated immediately moving into an RFP stage, even in this month, we know that the site selection and the direction of the convention center is critical to any hotelier's performa. And therefore, we're recommending right now that we don't issue an RFP until we have the direction of the convention center sort of settled down, and then we can focus on issuing the RFP to hoteliers. But I think we are overall very pleased with what we saw.
Thank you. And you may recall when we put out the RFQ, we said at the time that when it came in, we would analyze both the quantity and the quality of the responses. So we'll certainly with JS Held's assistance, they'll be able to analyze the responses towards a full-service hotel we asked for in the RFQ, and what we're looking for is a hotel partner. So we'll simply await recommendation on when to move forward with an RFP after you completed your analysis.
And I will say that our hotel experts actually come out of our Cincinnati office, so they are the people who are doing most of that analysis. You're going to hear from me, and you will eventually hear from them, but that analysis comes from the people who are working on hotels.
Okay. Any questions about that process or the response? All right, thank you. Update on the CMC RFP responses. Jim, I think again, we're back to you on that.
Yes, our responses to the RFQ are due on May 10th, which is Friday. We have a evaluation committee, which we discussed last month, that will be reviewing those. That evaluation committee is myself, Deb from JS Held, Mary Krupinski from JS Held, Jeff Underwood, Adam Teese, Doug Bruce, and John Weichart. We will be going through and reviewing those. We will have a special meeting with recommendation for that will occur on May 22nd. We have that meeting scheduled already. And then interviews will occur during the week of June 3rd with the goal for final board approval and selection on June 12th at June 12th, 2024.
Jim, you just locked up. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, and I think you were just saying we'd have a recommendation about, I think you were about to give a different date.
Okay, yes. Recommendations will be at a special meeting on May 22nd. Interviews will be the week of June 3rd, with board approval slated to occur at the June 12th meeting.
And I might point out that the report on May 22nd from the evaluation committee will be the evaluation committee recommendations on whom to invite to interview, which the full board will have to approve that recommendation. And interviews that take place the week of June 3rd will be in front of the full board. And as a result, those will be public meetings. Is that correct?
Correct.
So the public is certainly invited to attend, and we interview those who have been invited to respond to the CMC. Anything else, Jim?
No.
Okay, thank you. Deb, do you want to make comment on the pre-proposal meeting from last week and on which, I think there's an update. We had 6 respondents to the CMC.
So there were 6 respondents to the RFQ. We did invite all of them to submit on the RFP. One has opted to drop out. That's Hagerman. So Hagerman has said that due to their workload, they will not be submitting to the RFP. So we had 5 remain, which was a great group. And many are in the audience today. We did have a pre-proposal meeting last week, and everyone's excited to help you construct this facility. And so I'm sure that they are eager to submit their proposals.
So you had the pre-proposal meeting and an opportunity for questions and answers, and I think probably key to the success was my introduction of everybody in the room. And
We had very few questions.
okay, so that's are there any questions about the update on the CMC RFP? Any questions from board members? All right, moving on. Update on request to city and county for site availabilities. We have received responses from both the city and the county to our request for them to let us know what sites may be available, whether those sites were being donated, whether there was an expectation of compensation for the sites. So I'm going to, and those have all been forwarded to you, I'm going to make an attempt to summarize what I think we received, just for the benefit of everybody in the room. The response from the county was that they listed 20 parcels that are connected to this property, to this area. and indicated that all 20 parcels are available for donation to the project with a couple of caveats, one being, as we've known all along, that the property that I'm going to refer to as that east property towards Napa and towards Walnut Street is not available until after the November election, which is not problematic anyway. It's currently the site used for early voting. In that they identified properties available to the east, to the west, this property, and said that the south properties are available, but they would want to hear from us more about necessity of using the south properties if we determine that's the direction that we want to go. The response we received from the city was there was an identification of 5 properties, 5 parcels that were available. 3 of the properties were being donated, and I believe those 3 properties are south of the convention center. 2 of the properties parcels that, to summarize it so we all can get sort of a visual, were what we've been referring to as the Bunger Robertson properties, and that those 2 properties, if we have interest in them, if we deem those properties necessary for our expansion, would require negotiation for purchase if we deem those properties to be available. They're not properties that are going to be donated towards the site. And I want to make sure, and Corporation Counsel Rice is here, I want to make sure that I'm stating correctly, because there was a question from the board. Of the 5 parcels, 3 are donated, and the 2 that are subject to negotiation and purchase are the Bunger Robertson properties to the north. Okay, so Corporation Counsel Rice is nodding affirmatively, and we put that in the minutes that is the correct interpretation of the response. I also want to mention that we received today a copy of a letter that 8 members of the Bloomington City Council sent to the Bloomington Redevelopment Commission prior to their Monday meeting, and the 8 signatories to that letter to the Redevelopment Commission indicated that it is their opinion that they do not want the Bunger Robertson property donated for the convention center expansion, that the price that was paid for the 2 parcels on the Bunger Robertson property, which is approximately $7 million, that the city council is signaling that they expect compensation for those 2 properties. They do not want them to be donated. Compensation of up to $7 million for those 2 properties. When I say up to, that may not be correct, but the price of the properties that was purchased out of TIF dollars, they want that to be reimbursed rather than donated if we decide to go in that direction. And Council President Piedmont Smith is here. Did I correctly, is that a correct summary of that? Okay, thank you very much. So I want to make sure that I forwarded that to all of you as well. I want to make sure that that's also part of our record. So that's an update on the request from the city and the county for site availabilities. That was item 6. Any questions about that update? All right, item 7 is presentation from Schmidt Associates on project rescoping. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Hempstead and her team, and they can go ahead and give us that update.
I'm gonna let my team introduce themselves. I'm Sarah Hempstead. I'm the CEO of Schmidt Associates. I'm an architect by training and been involved with this project for 5 years. I don't know, a long time since.
Eddie Layton, project manager, Schmidt Associates.
Lisa Gounters, project manager with Schmidt Associates.
Cheryl Winholt, project architect with Schmidt Associates.
And with us online, we have our partner, David, who I think is on now. Is he on now? Excellent. And he is muted. So if they ask a really hard question about conventioning, we may need to unmute him in order for him to ask. What we were asked to do today was to come back and give you all an update of a couple of things. One reminder, what foundational principles of this project, where it has been and which informs where it is going. Talk a little bit about the state of the convention center industry. Where is it right now compared to where it was when we started working on this project back in 2018, 2019. We're going to run through a couple different options of how the space and place could lay out based on all the different options of land that we mentioned earlier. And probably of most interest to you, we're going to talk a little bit about prices and escalating the prices that we had estimated before into what those numbers might look like. like now. So just as a recap of project goals, I don't need to do karaoke of this for you, but a couple key goals are really important. That we needed more exhibition space to be more attractive to modern conventions, that we needed to modernize the spaces that we had now, give them flexibility, give them better technology, the things that our attendees are asking for, the things that our meeting planners are asking for, that we needed to be an authentic space, that we needed to be connected to Bloomington in every way that you can be connected, physically, but also in terms of what it looks like and feels like. Connected space and place, that we needed to be highly sustainable, and highlight some of our great local vendors, that this is a place for both the community that is here, but also for all of our guests that come in and want them to really experience the place that's here. Those project goals fundamentally have been the project goals that are in place as our true north since 2018, 2019. We were asked, what does the convention business look like now? Post-COVID, what has changed? And there is good news on that front. If you, like I, like traveling to places to learn new things, like anyone in the convention business back there is nodding their heads. So as an industry, the data tells us that the convention industry will be back to 2019 levels in 2025, which is fantastic. That is a national average, and that is hopefully when we're just about ready to open this project. Locally, the news is even better. So in Indianapolis, talking to the Visit Indy folks, they are already recovered 100% from the pandemic back to 2019 levels. And that is true across the board. They're beating all the national averages, both on hotels and on convention center rates. So your nearest good model would be Indianapolis. It is also true here in Bloomington. Thank you. So here in Bloomington, we are already within 1%. From 2023 to 2019, 1% on hotel occupancy. We're within 2% of where we were with convention center bookings. So that is great. All of that data tells us that people do want to get together still and physically meet. They just want some different things too. They want the ability to do this kind of meeting where we have some of our folks attending online and being able to present online. They want technology-rich environments where Lisa can come in and just plug in her computer, and this is not a problem to make this kind of presentation. They want some new things in terms of biosecurity, but they want to travel places and get together to learn, to meet people, to buy and sell products. The convention industry is still. So I want to talk a little bit about the program, because any of the options that you see here really have three big components that are the same across the board. The big new space, the number one big new space that we need to build as a part of this project is the exhibition hall. We need flexible exhibition space. That is tall. You've all been to big convention centers. That is tall ceiling, big spaces with not very many columns, that are technology rich, that are power rich, and that can subdivide so that they can serve a wide variety of users. That's the big new space that we need to build. And that space has amenities that go with it. We need new kitchen to serve that big new space. We need new support spaces and storage spaces to serve that big new space. We need a main lobby so that people can safely integrate into that space. That's one big thing we need to do. The other big thing we need to do is take a look at this building, because it's an important piece of Bloomington's downtown. So how do we make this building a part of that expansion? We get to build less new space when we do that. But that means this place needs some new things too, right? It needs that technology integration. It needs to link in naturally and easily with the new space. And then we need a way to connect those two things. So big picture, every option that you see is going to have some version of that. What do we do with this space? What do we do with our big new space and its supporting elements? And how do we tie those things together? And Lisa's going to run through 4 different options of how we could do it.
So when we did our design trip, roughly about 4 years ago, we explored a variety of different, what we call district plans. And so what you see here are 4 that we kind of pulled forward today for further evaluation. So basically every different direction from this current building is what we're looking at. So from north, south, east, and west. So we'll look first at the north option. This is what we were referring to, the Bungo Robinson property. And so what you see is the new addition would basically fill that block. The pink area, and this would be consistent from option to option, is that new ballroom exhibit space that we talked about. The yellow would be pre-function space, and then those blue are the support spaces, restroom, storage, etc. The large blue to the left would be a kitchen storage loading area. And then down below is the existing building that we would probably do some modifications to make sure that those pre-function spaces talk to each other. What you see in this option is some sort of connection of the intersection. It could be that, or it could just be a simple walkway as well that we connect those two. And then we are also starting to identify where future hotel option would be as well. With the south option, we were looking at the addition being to the far south here and some sort of enclosed link that does create an opportunity for some nice outdoor space with that as well, and a really nice connection to the B line along there. And then again, in this particular option, you would have the future hotel site to the east or potentially to the north. The east option, where we were talking about the Napa store, again, we would have some sort of connection across College Street, and we would be looking at loading them off to the east side. In this particular case, we would look at the hotel likely being to the north. And then our last option would put the addition on the opposite side of the B line. That would create an opportunity for a connector over the B line so that we could connect those pre-function spaces. And then loading would happen in a similar way to what it is doing here on the current site. It would come up from the south, from the parking lot space along that west side. So those are our four options that we have sort of looked at and developed at a high level. Ed is going to walk through some pros and cons and some cost options associated with those.
So obviously, all of these sites provide different opportunities in terms of the parking that's available. We know that the current building is surrounded by surface parking, and it also has the 4th Street garage that's recently renovated. So these numbers are looking at holistically across all those sites and available parking, knowing that depending on where the expansion ends up, these numbers will flex because they're going to end up occupying some of the surface lots for the construction. But generally, looking at surface lots, not counting that block on the north side, there are currently 471 available spaces. There's a total of 524 spaces in the 4th Street garage. However, only 195 of those are accounted for as far as monthly passes. So you can imagine those are available for visitors. And then, so at least the total existing parking spots available of 656 before we subtracted from building construction on those sites. So that's one piece of the puzzle. The other piece we looked at is how much parking will we need, both from a kind of a building standard for Bloomington as well as kind of best practice for a building of this size across the country. So if you look at the zoning requirements, for convention centers, that's 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet. The size of building we're looking at about 8,000 square feet, that would require 216 spaces. So from a zoning standpoint, I'm not concerned about capacity there. We look at kind of best practice. I'm talking with David and some other research we've done on facilities this size. We expect to see somewhere around 750 parking spaces available yes at any one time. Obviously, that number is quite a bit larger, and it's also slightly larger than the current available spaces. Something a puzzle piece we'll have to solve to look at site locations and what's left. Because I think the last thing we want is for a large convention to be happening and we'll be parking off to the neighborhood around. Neighbors might be happy about that. We want to avoid that. So that leads us to kind of a summary of what all these options are. They all have different benefits, disadvantages. No option is perfect. No option is terrible. They all are valid. So we've started to try and think about how those are about to make sure we're being mindful of them. And this is certainly not an exhaustive list. And the other thing is that it doesn't mention where it's parking because there are different options for each one. So things like the north expansion, it really does have a great connection to the city square and the courthouse, Beeline, other hotels that were developed in that part of the campus, closest to downtown Bloomington. But as John was mentioning, that one of the concerns there is the land availability. That's one of the sites that may not be donated. It does require 2 overhead walkways if we're trying to cross 3rd Street or also College to a new hotel on the east side. Because that building did occupy almost the entire block, does limit or doesn't have a simple expansion solution that some of the others do based on the availability of lots. The south expansion, while the furthest away from this building, does allow for several connections to the Beeline in a very meaningful way. And even with the size of the addition, there is more room to expand further if needed. But as mentioned, it's a both ways. So it lacks a connection to downtown or to some of the hotels and built in that direction. And that connector, while it is a built space, would be nice, but it would be an additional cost that the other options have seen. The east option is one of the closer ones to this building, but we would still have to cross College Avenue. We are close to the 4th Street Garage. I think it's an easy connection. There is a little bit of expansion room, but maybe not as much as some of the others. It does require 2 overhead walkways, again, just in case somebody is connected to this building. And then the west connection, the west expansion has the best connection to be on Lily. You become a connected out directly. It leaves open space for hotels on 2 sites. And then that is that building, it would be the closest to the residential area. So there might be some concerns about buffers from that building, and with the loading on that side, that's just to be concerned about. So besides the kind of the value propositions, also cost differences. These costs are very high level at this point. We will not really deep into details. It's really for comparison to get everything on apples and oranges. Taking the cost we looked at 2019, escalating up to today's standards, a lot of inflation in the past 5 years, and just trying to compare some of those pluses and minuses. Again, parking is something that I think has a big impact on some of this that we don't just know yet. But in general, then we did a low range and a high range, and but in terms of cost magnitude, they rank from the northwest, east to south. The one kind of wild card there that we don't have a big quantifying yet, but is sort of land acquisition costs, especially for the north. So while that could be the least expensive, construction wise, we tack on the land costs that may change that order. That's something that we are still working to develop.
I think you just touch on the difference between the top graph and the bottom, because I did
Sure,
not
yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah, so thank you for reminding me of that. We do have 2 options here. All the graphics we showed were for this larger 60,000 square foot edition. That large ballroom space, that really is the dial to get with the budget. We can pull it back, make it smaller or larger depending on how the budget falls. The 60,000 square foot is kind of the ideal size we would be with. We wanted to show another option for the 40,000 square foot edition, which again dials back the size of like the ballroom. Still a great space, right? Just slightly smaller, but does give a pretty good reduction in cost. Obviously, if you're cutting out a good portion of that new construction. And then talk about this briefly during the treasury report. We've been tracking kind of like the food and beverage tax situation. Jeff, looking at what money is available on the capacity, as well as just that cash balance accumulating that needs to be spent for this project. And so we do feel like we're talking with the group that there is a potential funding of anywhere from $54 to $76 million, which thankfully it appears like all of our options are within that range. So we feel good about that. Again, as we get into more detail on the project, once a site is selected, we really can kind of hone in on the budget, the actual funding capacity to get those more. So that's a lot of information very quickly, and so we'll have time for questions, but just really quickly on some next steps. As we talked about the June meeting, the goal would be that based on this conversation, based on conversations had with the county and the city, we would have a preferred vote or a vote on a preferred site option at the June meeting. So that kind of lead us in the next phase of design, we can get into more detailed concepts, really hone in on what this looks and look like, and start making a reality. Time is money, as everyone says, right? And as time goes on, inflation and escalation keeps happening. So one thing just to note is that we have about 3-month delay currently from when we last presented to you guys in December. And we're seeing about a 0.3% increase in cost every month to month. We can get that over a year. So at a project of this size, it's about $150,000 a month for the delay at this point. So it'd be great to move forward with this again. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah. Questions?
Please.
Yeah, Mr. Schooner.
So a couple of questions. Well, just an observation. I'm concerned that, and I think as we all are, that taxpayers are losing money on this project by the continued ongoing delays. So I think it's incumbent on us to really make some quick decisions and get all the pieces in place, because these are taxpayer dollars that we're talking. It's not just no personal fund or anything like that. We owe that, I think, to the taxpayers to give them the best value possible. So I hope that we can move forward as quickly as possible on getting whatever lingering questions remain, get answered so that we can do that. Kind of going back to, so the west expansion option, I've got a question about that, and then one other question too, but the west expansion option, how do we account this? Is there anything that we need to do if that's a realistic option to account for that very large new utility pole that you put up in the parking lot out there? Would that get in the way of any expansion?
Oh, sure, absolutely gets in the way, but that's a technical problem and one that has a technical solution.
Okay,
And so,
that's nothing to really be too.
so all of these sites have their unique utilities considerations, and where they were known entities, we worked with the site designer to try to accommodate something for those in the budget. I'm sure there are more site things that we will find with each site, but yes, we will have to work around, accommodate.
Would that be a
relocate.
potential another delay that would?
I think we have enough time in design that we can be working parallel paths if that was the selected solution.
And then on the space size, you mentioned two options, 60,000 square feet, 40,000 square feet. And I know there's a very good answer for this. And we have some CDC convention experts here with us. And maybe if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, they might be able to provide some additional reference to, but that's not just an arbitrary number that was come up with. There's logic behind that. One of the questions I get, I guess, in the community is, well, why do you need 60,000 square feet? Why do you need 40,000 square feet? Why can't you just make the convention center, the existing convention center, nicer and leave it at that?
So I'll give you the start of an answer, and then David, maybe if you wanted to, if we could unmute David, you might want to weigh in as well. But the start of that answer was you did have an economic analysis done as a part of this through Hunden Group.
Right.
And part of what they were charged to do was say, where does it look like the market has a need? What can you support in terms of thinking about this as a business, as a pro forma? And that 60,000 square feet was in alignment with the best case scenario, what the market was asking for, what the need was. And David, if you wanted to weigh in on that as well, it would be unmuted.
Yeah, so what Sarah said is correct. The Hunden study identified a sort of optimal size for that flexible ballroom exhibit space at about 35 to 40,000 square feet, which is what we're targeting in the 60,000 square foot expansion. These numbers are a little confusing because 60,000 square feet is sort of the gross area of new construction plus 40,000 square feet of the Monroe Center for a total of 100. So it gets a little bit hard to keep all these numbers straight in your head, but the 40,000 square foot expansion, frankly, is an approach that simply says, what if we don't have enough money to build 60,000 square feet? So it's a reduction from what Hunden identified as the optimum. Doesn't mean it couldn't be successful, but it does mean you're not going to be addressing the full extent of the market supportable demand that's already out there for a convention facility in Bloomington, Indiana.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Keith?
It's fascinating to be back here, right after 5 or so years that we've had this discussion now. It seems like this is kind of the first time where we're now debating it again. We've been meeting for 6, 7 months, and we're now actually starting to debate the site again. So I think it's kind of full circle to be back. I had a couple of comments. It would be really helpful if you, as a design architect, could present a bit of city context to these options. Meaning, parts of our downtown streets have strong urban design characteristics. They have walkable and approachable storefronts. They have comfortable pedestrian sidewalk environments. And like any other city in the entire world, some streets don't, and that's okay. We all wish that every single street did, like we were, would live in a medieval European city, but not everyone does. So there's some context to all of these that I think I would appreciate seeing in a few slides.
Sure.
Like, where has downtown Bloomington started to build strong urban edges that lend themselves to any one of these options contributing or making that even more significant, right? Either scale of building, context of the street, or the actual sidewalk.
Sure.
And then where are there context buildings that have kind of their not nice end that could match with our not nice end? Because every building has a not nice end, right? Utilities, loading, trash, all of the above. So I think a bit of city planning context, urban design context would be incredibly helpful.
Sure.
As we evaluate centers. Second, I continue to very much struggle with the idea of a major renovation of this building. It's my understanding this building was renovated approximately 10 to 12 years ago. It is a beautiful building. I'm concerned about the idea of saying we need to renovate this just because we need something different. I would much rather dedicate money, taxpayer money, into a new structure that has a longer term life duration and ripping out what appears to be very nice finishes and a very nice facility. So I really struggle with the idea of renovating this building.
Yeah, I guess I'll touch on that briefly. I think the limits of the renovation of this building are very much going to be driven by the direction of the expansion. How the lobbies tie together, how the support spaces need to work together. I think that's fundamentally the renovations will deal with function more than their aesthetics. The aesthetic is right? So yes, and that site selection piece really starts to drive that change what happens here.
Point made. I think there's a cost trade-off for wanting it to be slightly better versus
Sure.
5, 10, and $15 million. And what do we get in return for that investment? And there's an optics trade-off with this being a public project. This has been invested in. It's hard to get rid of it just because it doesn't quote unquote work. So I'm concerned about that. I also think in your presentation, this slide in particular, are you showing these as what you would consider a total project cost? This is everything. There's no other hidden thing not in this number, because to all of you on the board of managers, there's a difference between construction cost and total project cost. Total project cost includes what we pay our fine design team, our project management staff. There is no magic other money. So we should only ever quote total project costs.
So these are total project costs, and they're costs that the Schmidt team and Deb's team at JSL came up with together. And you see there's a pretty significant range there, right? Because there's a lot of things we don't know. I'll caveat that with the site in particular, that north site, that's a huge swing.
It's not in.
That's not in there.
Of course.
And then parking writ large is not in there. And that's a big, I don't know what the answer is, because again, that's very site specific, but that's a big number. But those numbers up top, the low, high range, those are total projects.
Anything associated with the hotels.
Of course. But you answered the question. These are considered total project
Yes,
costs.
they have,
not just
they have
construction.
contingency and design fees and all the other things that.
To that end, we could obviously build a facility for $1,100 a square foot, which is what your first options are and higher. But Board of Managers, we can build a facility for less. We do not have to pay $1,100 a square foot. We can pay $600 a square foot, $750. So I just some caution on these numbers. $1,100 a square foot is an extraordinary number in the Midwestern construction market.
As a little bit, the title is misleading. So the 60 and 40,000 is just for the addition. So these are all based on total addition plus renovation. So it's not quite.
So I would make a correction.
Thank you, Eddie.
That's very helpful. So we're
Yes.
more in the.
I think we're more in the 600 to 550.
There, I would really strongly get that on the slide, so really. And then the inflation perspective. Just for all of you on the Board of Managers, yes, inflation will raise the cost, or it does the reverse. You get less. The budget stays the same, you just get less. It's all perspective, right? At my house, when I want to do more, I either pay for it or I do less and pay the same amount. So it's just a perspective.
It's just an equation.
Yes. And I'm very appreciative of your number of 150,000 a month. The number I calculated based on IU's numbers was 155,000 a month. So we are the same exact. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other,
I have one.
Mr. Bruce?
And this kind of goes along with what Denise was bringing up. I think I'd like to see, especially as some of the points that he brought up about looking at how this interacts. I know there was a downtown plan, and then I think even the city might have a master plan, and just make sure that that has been looked at and incorporated into. It might guide some decisions that we make on this, or certainly some things that the city wants to see happen to this. And I think that goes along with what Mr. Thies was saying about some streets are great pedestrian streets and some streets aren't. And I think the city, through some of the plans they've created over the years, have some ideas on what they like to see. We certainly need to make sure that that's looked at.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. When we did this initiative in 2018, 2019, many of you may have been in the room. We had the giant city model with pictures of what was happening on the streets in the master plan. It's probably worth a relook to see if anything has changed since then, if there's something new that we don't know, new development planned and. Thank you.
Okay, Adam, I don't want to miss Mr. Baird, who's online here, and I don't want to look away and then forget that he's got his hand up. So why don't we turn to Mr. Baird for his questions or comments?
Thanks so much. Just a couple of quick clarifying points. In terms of the connector to Hyatt Place, is that a unilateral decision by this body, or is Hyatt Place aware of that possibility, or is that something that they have requested? So what's the relationship between this potential expansion and Hyatt Place in terms of a connector and sort of making them contiguous with convention space?
So the desire has been that the new hotel, whatever it is connected to the convention center, which will be part of a further negotiation once you have a hotelier and you can work within that context. That is irrespective of what happens with Hyatt Place. I don't think there is any current plan to connect in a different or new way to Hyatt Place. And so go back to the demographic, please. What more? Please hold. Now go to the deep south.
I don't think it was a physical connection. It was just a proximity. Is that correct?
Potential connect across 4th Street if they want.
Right. So the connector to the future hotel site really is the primary connector. You would have the opportunity to connect to hotels to the north of 4th Street, but it is not a requirement.
And we have to figure any costs into.
Right, and there is no cost to that. It's just an opportunity.
Another point, if I may, on the west option, I believe it calls this out in your pros and cons table. As Adam mentioned, the not nice part of the building is across the street from residences. And while I think there's probably something to be said for the west option from an efficient construction standpoint, given that we've all acknowledged that we want to move this project along as quickly as possible, it seems perhaps foolhardy to suggest that we're going to plop a convention center in a bunch of people's front yards and that's not going to delay this project further, because that sounds like poking a nest of hornets, perhaps unnecessarily.
Yeah, that's a valid point. If the west option is a selected site, then taking a look at where the not nice side of the building ultimately lands, maybe it's to the south of the flexible ballroom and exhibit, might be a better way to address that problem. But you're correct. Right now, that is against a residential street.
And at this time, this is just your imagining, because I really don't like to see that part against the Beeline Trail either. Which we have on some of the shirts. So I think, this is for us to look at and think about and bring to your thoughts.
Yeah, we are at a really critical juncture where we can design for you forever and we'll happily do so. But if we had a preferred site, it would be very helpful because what we can start to do is iterate on that, right? And look at all of the ways that we could make it better and better and better on that site or on those two sites. But the site really is our critical point of selection.
Any other questions? Mr. Silverstein?
Yeah, the issue of parking, I know it needs to be solved at some point. But it seems to me the pros and cons summary should have more assumptions about parking because the west expansion takes out a really large surface parking lot. That's harder to replace than some of the other options. And I think that needs to go into our pros and cons because that's a huge con right now. It's losing all that surface parking, particularly since we don't even, we think we need 750 spaces. We don't have that now in surface parking, and we're gonna, some of these options take out more surface parking than others.
Yes.
And so I just, when I'm looking at this pros and cons table, I want to think forward about which one is going to be harder to accommodate parking with if we go in that direction.
Sure, we can add parking to that table.
Mr. Teese, did you have another?
Yeah, just to Mr. Bruce's comment, I do think that we as a body are going to have to get approval from the Bloomington Plan Commission and ultimately City Council, correct? For this, we are not exempt, we are not an exempt government agency. Is that correct? Because they will look to whatever city plans are in force to adjudicate land use controls. So I think that's going to be really important going forward. So I appreciate Mr. Bruce's comment about existing city plans in force are going to be critical. And then on the west side, I think for clarification, there's a significant piece of property not owned by a government entity that we're drawing in this case. So for any of you playing along at home, we don't control that land.
But I think the slide indicated there were other property acquisitions necessary to make that happen.
Yep, that's true.
So, yeah.
So I hope we do that.
Property acquisition. One of so I think about all this, I think if I own properties and I see needs to be acquired, I'm thinking.
It's a good day.
It's a good day for me. The direction they're gonna go, they've just indicated they know they need to acquire my property. So, yeah, I mean, there are clearly advantages and disadvantages. It's important for us to reach some decision which direction we want to go so we can begin to deal with these advantages and disadvantages. Kind of where we are. So are there other questions now about Mr. Steenman?
So for all intents and purposes, there's really just two options available to us right now where we have everything in place that we can make a decision on. That would be the deep south option and the east option. That wouldn't require any additional expense for land acquisition.
That might be beyond my pay grade to answer with surety, but I believe what he said is true. And then the north option is the Bunker Rock.
Right. But that's.
Talked about ad nauseam. We know it's available, we know it's government owned, and it has a number associated.
Yeah, so I think I agree, and you're correct. The east and south options are already available to us through donations from the county. The west option would require additional property. The north option clearly require additional property, and on our budget, we now know clearly that the acquisition of north property isn't from 0 to 7 million because 0 is not on the table. So it's something.
Update that to say $1.
Yeah, I would.
Very pricey.
$1.
Yeah, it's not even safe to say $1. I think it's clear to us that that's not the case. Other questions from the board? Representative. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Bear.
Oh, that's all right. Thanks. I think we all want to move fast, and I don't want to rush to judgment here, but it certainly seems to me that the east option is overwhelmingly the best choice. The south option moves the heart of the convention center away from downtown, away from a parking garage. The north option, we don't have the money for. The west option is right in the neighborhood, and we don't know what the land situation is going to be. So this feels like a very obvious decision, but maybe I'm misreading or mischaracterizing the facts at hand. And if it is an obvious division, then let's decide.
Well, I don't know that it's as obvious to all of us as it is to you. So I think that's probably what we need to have discussion about. But I appreciate your perspective.
And I think the other piece that needs to be considered is the hotel. We haven't really been talking about that, but if we take that site for the convention center, we still need to locate the hotel site.
Yeah, you still need, yes, once we've selected a site for the expansion, then that says, then here's what's available for the hotel. And that obviously has issues as well. Moving to the west has an issue, not only with, encroaching towards the neighborhood, but it has issues of egress, Madison Street, and there are things we have to think through. There's obvious considerations no matter what site we go towards. Other questions?
Can I ask, Schmidt, when would you prefer to know what?
Like 2019.
Okay.
No, we will move at the speed that you are comfortable moving forward. Again, I feel that the decision on the site you need to be really comfortable with. But it is the next biggest design decision that lets us do everything else. And I too hate spending money on inflation when you don't have to. So we're a little bit behind already, which has a cost to it. Sooner is better.
And I would only add, unless there are other comments, that to me what's extremely significant is the note in smaller print at the bottom, which is we have now missed our original hope for goal of completion by the last quarter of 2026, and we're now at the earliest in the first quarter of 2027. I've mentioned to some of our friends in city government that if we hit that one, we'd be ribbon cutting during the primary of the next election for city officials. So that's put things in perspective. We've already pushed out through the current term of officers. And secondly, the projected cost. I mean, this obviously, Mr. Teese reminds us every time we meet, it's true. The decision to delay costs more, or it shrinks the size and scope of the project, one or the other, because we're going to end up with a finite budget for this project. So having heard this, and I appreciate the presentation, Mr. Whitlash, are you still with us? Is he muted?
I am.
I had asked you for a recommendation on what we need to do at this point with this presentation and with the information we've received from the city and the county, and I know you're prepared to give us one, so would you please do that?
Yeah, my recommendation is this is the next step that I think you would typically take when considering the acquisition or negotiation or strategy regarding real estate, is that you would have an executive session for purposes of discussing that, which is something that's contemplated by the Indiana open door laws, which specifically provides that a session may be held in executive session of a governmental entity for the strategy related to acquisition or purchase or lease of real estate that can be held and discussed in executive session up to the time that an offer to purchase is executed at that time. It's certainly also within the powers of the CIB to look at acquiring property. The Indiana statute, the ordinance, all contemplate that that a CIB, their powers include the power to gather and consider how best to handle real estate. So it's my suggestion that this discussion of how to, or our strategy regarding the real estate related to this project, take place in executive session as soon as we can schedule one.
And for public purpose, I inquired of the board members if they would be available for such an executive session this coming Monday. They are all available either in person or by online participation. So we will schedule an executive session for this Monday, May 13th at 12 o'clock. For the purposes as described by Mr. Whitlash, to discuss in particular property acquisition. As we now know, having had responses from all of the property owners and what we need to think about. So we will meet in executive session Monday, 12 o'clock for that purpose. So, Mr. Bear, I see your hand. Is your hand up again, or is that from previous?
Yeah, it is. Just one quick one for Schmidt that I hadn't contemplated before, please. Sorry for taking it out of order. Is it possible to have the hotel and the convention center in the same footprint? I presume this convention center, we would have it probably 2 floors, 3 floors as it is now. Could we build a hotel above or a hotel below the convention center, which then saves us an entire plot of land?
David, would you like to speak to that in terms of best practices?
Yeah, I would love to weigh in on that. The answer to the question is yes, it is possible for the hotel and the convention center to be co-located. However, I would point out that solution, when it is usually used in very dense, very expensive urban construction where land is extremely scarce. And I would say, in my opinion, none of those conditions pertain in Bloomington, Indiana at this moment, because it's extremely expensive and extremely complicated. So what you end up with is a condominium arrangement where the publicly owned convention center sits at ground level and the privately owned hotel sits on top of the publicly owned convention center with various interpenetrating spaces like elevator shafts and whatnot. That creates a 3D jigsaw puzzle for the lawyers to sort out, who owns what and what bears on what and who's holding what up. And like I say, it can be done, but it's super complicated and rather expensive. And I think, given the site plans that we were just looking at, I would not recommend it for this application. Although, if land was, if we were talking about $50 million parcels, yeah, you'd certainly want to look at it. But I don't
David,
think
you frozen. You're frozen.
Pardon
There
me?
you are. Oh, you were frozen for a second, or else I was having some sort of incident.
Just internet glitches. So yeah, the answer is yes, it is technically feasible. Yes, it has been done before, but usually in situations where real estate is much more expensive than what we're talking about here.
Great. Thanks, David.
There is a UDO that dictates size and scale.
Well, and if I may offer one more thing, in Bloomington, Indiana, I think the height of the combined facility would be a major concern to the local citizenry.
And elected officials. Yes. Okay, so we've addressed Mr. Bear's additional question. We've set an executive session for Monday, May 13th at noon. Are there other questions from board members at this point? On item 7. All right, item 8 is old business. Is there any old business to be brought before the board members? Seeing none, is there any new business? I only have one. I have one item. I've been in conversation, excuse me, with Mr. Bear, asking him if he would be willing to work with the development of a website specific to the CIB. And he's indicated that he's, because he's not here in person to give facial expressions, I'm going to say he was eager to do that. Said he was eager to do that and to move forward on that. And he was hopeful he might be able to move forward to it, maybe perhaps by June. That would be extremely helpful to us because we've had inquiries, a number of inquiries about where do people find our meetings, where do they find our minutes, where do they find our agenda, and we're trying to get to all of that. So, Mr. Bear, if you're still agreeable, I'm most appreciative that you have agreed to do that. And we'll keep you muted so you won't deny it. But have I stated that correctly, Mr. Bear?
You may have overstated my eagerness slightly, but I'm certainly compliant with your wishes. Thank you.
You know what? That's good enough for me. Thank you very much.
Happy to do it.
Thank you. All right. Pardon me. Yes.
I hope we can have comments too, as we move forward. I would like to know what the county and the city feel about some of this. Making a huge decision for this community. And we need to have as much comment as we can.
Yeah, and we have comments every meeting that we have. We're going to have them here shortly, and I would imagine we'll probably have some. Our first item of business that we're charged with though is the site selection activity, and we need to do that before we can move into comments about design or construction or any of those things that obviously everyone is interested in having input to. You know, another thing I would mention as we meet in an executive session and talk about this issue of land acquisition, we have another party to all of this, obviously, which is the county, who has interest in how we also are expending food and beverage tax dollars, and also would certainly be involved if there were any part of a negotiation that included exchanges of land. So we cannot forget that I certainly don't forget that we need to have the county's input as well when we talk about what direction we want to go as far as the site is concerned. Any other comments from board members? Mr. Spoonwell.
Well, I'll just say that, my next, plan of action is I do want to go back to my appointing body, the county council, to put the food and beverage tax in place to really kind of understand their thoughts, and any potential concerns they might have with a pretty significant reimbursement of $7 million, for a potential, for the potential property to the north. So, I just want to make sure that the elected officials have a full awareness, and I think that'll be good information to also bring back to the executive session.
Yeah, and I would encourage each of us who represent various parties to seek out some guidance from those parties if possible before we meet on Monday in our executive session. I'd also point out that I believe we also have a fiduciary responsibility to make our own recommendations back to our appointing bodies. So it's a two-way street. Any other comments from board members? All right, we're to item 10, which is comments from the public, and I would ask for comments from the public and remind the public that we have a 2-minute limitation on comments from the public, and I'm going to ask Mr. Parrish to be the timekeeper. Let us know if anybody's 3 minutes expired, but are there comments from the public at this point? Any comments from the public? Yes, Council President Piedmont Smith.
Yeah, I was also curious as to what building these options that were presented, vision. I could tell from the plan, the PowerPoint. So I'm hoping there are at least 3 stories. The downtown character overlay, which would in our UDO includes all the options except for west expansion. So, and that height limit is 50 feet. However, there are some incentives, and since you're talking about rebuilding and sustainable development practices, that might entitle to an extra story. What I want to encourage you to do is to try to make it a multi-story building as much as possible, so that
have, more space for green space around it and, make the best use of, land, even though there is a lot of land available, but there are also a lot of other things that, can be done with that kind of land. So that's what I was saying.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? All right, seeing none, our next series of board meetings, obviously, we have the executive session set for Monday, May 13th at noon. Our next board meeting is the special meeting set for Wednesday, May 22nd, at 3 p.m. here at the convention center. I want to simply add one additional comment to all of this, and that is that I feel very strongly that we also have a responsibility back to the city administration on the site selection, because it's clear. Mayor Thompson's made it clear, certainly made it clear yesterday. I saw a video of comments about the importance of the Hopewell project, the administration, and to the city. The sooner we are able to say we either are not a potential buyer of Unger Robertson property, frees up mayor, the administration, and city council to move forward with whatever plans they may have to dispose of that property, to gain revenue that they may be seeking to reimburse the tip. So I'm sensitive to speed as it assists the city as it is to assist the movement forward of the project. And also respectful of the fact, and I'll repeat it again, that the current perspective of both the city council and the mayor, this property being one for which they seek reimbursement, is within every right they have. The priorities have changed over the last number of years. The dedication of that property is a donation years ago. It's not a commitment made by current representatives of city government, and it's not one that we should expect them to be held to. So we appreciate that, we respect that, and we will get them an answer as quickly as possible. Hopefully in June, we're going to be able to provide some decision, some direction about where we would like to go. So with that, it's time to adjourn. Was mentioned, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. We are adjourned. Thank you all.